Thank you very much for the invitation, Pa Yusuf and colleague from CSIS. And I also would like to recognize in this room my boss, Pa Hasan Virayuda, my internal boss. So I'm a bit, normally I'm not nervous making speeches because I would just say whatever I want to say. But in front of Pa Hasan, I think, you know, that's why I bring all the paper because of him. Otherwise, I would just come and blurt. So thank you very much once again for the invitations. I want to start with a story that took place in April 2023, I think. I was still in Germany as ambassador, and our president, Pak Jokowi, was in Germany, in Hanover. We were part of the Hanover Messe, largest industrial exhibition in the world, and Indonesia was a partner country at that time. We brought in around 200 industries uh, coming to Germany. We had a really big event at the time, and after the official opening, it was Ramadan, so we were hosted by Chancellor Olaf Scholz in a very old, nice mayor house in Hanover, and we start the iftar, and Chancellor Olaf Scholz, after warmly welcoming us, he asked a very intriguing questions, and it took us about 30 seconds to reply. His question was, Mr. President, do you think non-life movement is still relevant? This is a question from German Chancellor in 2023. So apparently, the largest economic power in Europe still looks at non-life movement as a very important element. So I was surprised because that was not in the talking point. The talking point is about the industry, how many machines you produce, how many cars you not produce. uh, and it took us about 30 seconds, and everybody's looking at each other. This is becoming geopolitical dinner. And President mentioned, of course, it's still very relevant. And then we continue the discussions on non-aligned movement in the dinner of Hanover Messe, the largest industrial event in the world. So uh, if all the industrialists in Germany on the table is looking at non-aligned movement, whether it's still relevant or not, and they believe it's still relevant at that time, I think that coins very well with the discussions today. I was not here this morning, but hearing from different colleague, it was again once reiterated that it is even more relevant. So one of the other challenge for me personally is to go around different invitation making speeches like this, and I have no time to make speech, so I asked ChatGPT. Those are all ChatGPT, okay? This is not made by my staff, neither by myself. So it's all ChatGPT production, right? So I'm going to deliver a speech to you what ChatGPT was saying to me. And I, of course, give some addition here and there, but mostly this is AI. And actually, it makes more sense, right? So when you talk about relevance, whether non-aligned is still relevant, ChatGPT gives me three answers, which is the multipolarity of the world today, which is true, right? Strategic independence of country is needed, which is true. When I was in Germany and Europe, they had a question of being independence in terms of trying to make decisions on energy, on security umbrella, on economy, and those are the three things that, for a very long time, Europe was dependent on U.S. for security umbrella. Russian gas and Chinese market, but those things proven to be difficult today. So they are looking at this being able to independently make a policy, and that I think why that was the questions of the German chancellors to President Jokowi. And then, secondly, still relevant because of the global inequality still continues on until today. And of course, it still represents the voice of the global South. Although, if we look at the terminology, global South is not exactly the right terms, and the dynamics of the so-called South-South is also changed very much. Because when you talk about South-South or non-aligned movement in the 40s and the 50s, we're basically looking at the very stark differences between developing countries and developed countries. But today, the dynamics is different. Our GDP is larger than the Netherlands GDP, for instance. Many countries in the so-called South or non-aligned, they're very advanced. Here in our neighborhood, we have Malaysia, we have Singapore, non-aligned. They have a very advanced economy. And these are just an example. All those three things, current geopolitical situations, on the importance of being independent in trying to make our own policy. So strategic independence. But I want to focus also on the relevance of non-aligned movement in Africa and also in Asia specifically. Now in Africa, it has become a geostrategic battleground again. You see different so-called proxy wars. You see different conflicts still pestering in Africa, still ongoing. UN Security Council is not able to do anything in different parts of Africa, for instance. And of course, you have now a continuously similar issue since the 1940s, which is resource sovereignty. So in the past, you talk about oil, you talk about gas, and then you talk about diamond, and now you talk about critical minerals. So continuously a problem in Africa. And you still have the debt issue, economic injustice. You now have an additional problem of climate vulnerability, climate financing. The promise of climate financing, for instance, is not coming to life, as a matter of fact. And another additional issue, which is digital issue, the digital sovereignty, the digital gap. These are the modern, if you will, issue that very much impact the countries in Africa and very much impact how the non-aligned movement should be able to work on this particular issue. Now in Asia, we are again ground zero for great power rivalry. In the Second World War, of course, we were in that situation, and now we have a competitions, geopolitical rivalry in our regions. We have the clout and the economic power in Asia, much different than what happened in the 40s and the 50s. But the geoeconomics of Asia, including specifically ASEAN, now with the trade war situations, makes all of us need to see where is the quote-unquote alignment that we are going to develop. The Asian countries with a very strong economic development have a very strong potentials in global leaderships. Many BRICS nations are coming from Asia, for instance. And of course, there is an issue of climate again in Asia. I mean, in Africa, the direct impact is on the land, on the drought, on the climate for farming. But for us in Asia, rising sea level is very real. It's a very real threat. And also this is another element that we need to look at Asia. So those are the elements that I think requires a strategic independence on how we move about in organizing ourselves in all those different issues. Now, what are the strategies? How to do it? You know, in a very simple terms of us of NAM to become relevant. I think we need to modernize the agenda of non-aligned movement. We need to discuss AI. We need to discuss digital divide. We need to probably even discuss critical raw minerals, for instance. I think the agenda of the non-aligned movement needs to be modernized to follow the current situation today. Stronger institutional capacity, it's very important. This, I think, we can see in the critical raw minerals. We should be able to share experience within the non-life movement, not just exporting the raw minerals, but how you increase your capacity in terms of processing, for instance. The leverage is very important as well because we hold a big voice. A discussion among non-aligned movement on climate financing, on the issue of critical raw minerals, on the issue of the impact of climate, for instance, how we can impact the global climate policy, for instance, is a very important element in the agenda of non-aligned movement. We need also to have a stronger messaging because we're using the technology, social media. The non-aligned movement may or may not be known by the younger generations these days. And I think this is the homework of many countries in the non-aligned movement, and as well as looking at the current geopolitics today, how we create partnership without dependency. This, I think, it's the challenge that we need to develop together. In Africa, I think we have an already running organization, the African Union. So a very strong link, cooperations with a very real agenda between the non-aligned movement and AU is very, very important. Similarly, here in Asia, link between the non-aligned movement, the existing regional architectures like the ASEAN, for instance, or even RCEP, the economic bloc, I think it's a very important as well. Promoting in Africa intra-African trade, in Asia intra-Asian, and ASEAN especially intra-Asian trade. I just came back from Sabah. The purpose of my visit to Malaysia, to Sabah, was to try to develop a stronger economic relation between state and provinces. We are trying to see the possibility of expanding the cooperation between, say, Sabah and Kalimantan Utara, Kalimantan Timur, and also Sulawesi Utara, Sulawesi Barat, and Sulawesi Selatan, because looking at the trade war today, we have to look at the number as well, that 10% of the global trade is the American contributions. 85% is coming from somewhere else. And that 85% should include ASEAN. We need to develop a stronger intra-ASEAN trade through different ways and means, and including also trade between states and provinces. Digital technology, I think it should be used in both Africa and Asia. What I'm talking is, for instance, a very simple thing like QRIS in ASEAN or QRIS in the whole Africa. Imagine the cutting the middleman in terms of payment. It will create lots of economy in the region as well. This we can develop ourselves within ASEAN, and this also within Africa, for instance. And both in Africa and Asia, I think we need to strengthen the power of the civil society. So I think all in all, whether to answer the question whether non-aligned movement is still relevant, the answer, it is relevant. It is even more relevant. But then the issue is how we are making ourselves relevant, what are the strategies, what are the agenda, what are the issues, and how we are going about to do all those different agenda in the name of the cooperations between the non-aligned movement, which I believe the dynamics have changed dramatically today in terms of the economy, in terms of the ability of the leadership of each country of a non-aligned movement, technologically as well, geopolitically as well. So we need to leverage that to bring about a stronger non-aligned movement and with a much more concrete cooperation. So I will just close there. I think we share same thinking, and I would imagine, Pak Wanandi, that the result of this discussion today would be recommendations or steps that or agenda that can be follow up by countries of non-aligned movement, Indonesia included, in terms of how we can lead in some of the important agenda that can bring the non-aligned movement even more relevant today. Terima kasih. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you so much, Excellency. Pak Havas, I understand you were willing to take one or two brief questions from the audience. So may I invite members of the audience who's willing to take a question?
2 questions free, third one pay.
All right, 2 questions are free, third one is paid.
Yes.
Singapore.
Yes, Prof.
Yeah. So this morning we talked a lot about the Bandung principles, norms that have defined the non-aligned movement. But as we go into the global south, what do you see are which is very different, how do you see are the norms, the rules, the principles that can define global south today? As an international lawyer, what are the emerging norms, rules, principles that would help us to define this global south that will have to be different from the non-aligned movement?
A number of things came to mind, Prof, actually, coming out of COVID. So there should be an international treaty, or at least arrangement, if they don't want to go to treaty, on the rapid response of international community in pandemic or future pandemic. Because as my experience, I was in Europe, and when they found out the productions of the vaccines, so the first step of many European countries was to ban the export. So benevolence, charity is gone to the drain when you face this kind of thing. So this is, I think, is one aspect that is relevant for developing countries. Second, again, I want to underline, Prof, on the critical raw minerals. There was a resolution long time ago, I think 1968, on the permanent sovereignty of countries over its natural resources. It has become international law in terms of customary international law, but somehow it was lost in WTO. And there was a reading or article in WTO which basically said you cannot ban export of raw minerals. So there is actually a what do you call it, differences of the international law on WTO, because I think the WTO regulations on critical raw minerals is against the customary international law. But I think this is a typical negotiations in one specific element, Prof, where if you send a trade negotiators to negotiate on trades, they might not know other kind of aspect. I'll give you an example, Prof. There is only one word, ocean, in Paris Agreement. 2015, I was there with a number of countries. We are trying to put 3 paragraphs on oceans in the Paris Agreement. The idea is very simple. 75% of Earth is water. We are going to talk about climate change. We should include oceans. But the discussion was unbelievably difficult, even for our own negotiator, because 99% of negotiators in Paris Agreement are terrestrial people. They are foresters. They know very little or not at all about the oceans. So for them, including ocean has become a politically impossible situation because they don't know. And they want to have the result quick. So they finally agree to put the word ocean in preambular paragraph. And only in 2022, 3, we are talking about a very rather silly exercise. It's called mainstreaming oceans in climate discussion. I mean, how can we mainstream 75% of planet into discussion? This should be done in 2015. But I think this issue happens in many places. So you need sometimes someone who has a larger, broader view to negotiate on some very important international treaty. So these are the two that I'm thinking in mind. And the experience, I think, is UNCLOS. UNCLOS 1982 basically is an international norm that was developed by developing countries. The archipelagic states are all developing and non-aligned countries. Those who are demanding for extension of continental shelf, they are from developing countries. Those who wanted to have an EEZ, I think the African from the east, they want to have an EEZ, very, very large space, for instance. So that, I think, as an example, how developing countries, the non-aligned movement, can work together in creating one norm on international law. So those two issues that I have in mind for a while, actually. And critical raw minerals, I think the issue should not go only on WTO, but the underlining element of how the resolution of 1968 also should be able to be revisited, to be looked again and become international treaty, hopefully. Yes.
Perhaps one more question from the audience. Sorry, Susie?
Thank you, Pak Hafaz. I'm Susie Sudarman from Universitas Indonesia. When we look back at non-aligned movement, it seems like it is a social order, international social order. And the theory of communication says to maintain a social order, you have to continue conflicting communication. And you have mentioned about the problems of COVID, a problem of critical minerals. You know that the social order of non-aligned movement need to have conflict communications to other social orders so that your social order will be maintained. Is this one of the policy of Kemenlu right now, or are we trying to be so sweet to everyone that in the end, conflict communication doesn't exist and your social order cannot be maintained? That's my question.
Yeah, I think what we are looking is how countries in the non-aligned movement individually can maximize the benefit that they have. Because say one country in Africa has a lot of resources, they have a lot of critical minerals. Investors come, right? Investors from the US, from China, from Europe comes, and they may not have an ability to negotiate properly with all those giants in terms of foreign investment, for instance. And foreign investment, they need them domestically, but at what level they are willing to bring in and to create the contract, between them and those countries. Sometimes the investment law simply doesn't exist. If you talk about investment law as part of the social order or social contract of that particular country, for instance. So those countries are in a very, very weak situations. Whereas on the other hand, like Indonesia, you have the ability to negotiate, the ability to create an environment where we have a both win-win situation. This is part of the Indonesian law, part of the Indonesian social contract. This also happened, and I know in Chile, for instance. In Chile, I think one of the largest producer of lithium, they have their own social contract where the lithium coming from the land of the indigenous people are being respected, some rights are being protected, and where are the place that you can extract, for instance. So they have a very complicated system for investment and extraction because they're able to do that. But many countries don't have that capacity, right? But we can see this as a helicopter view that if we can share informations and possibly even if we can develop a norm like what Professor mentioned before, that would be great for those countries who have no ability to defend themselves against large foreign investors coming to their country. So each and individual social contracts or social order of the country with such large investment can at least be mitigated the risk if we be together in trying to address the common issue and trying to see what are the best way to come out of it. So this is also a very important element. And also the possibility of investment coming from non-aligned movement, non-aligned countries. We have done that. Indonesia has done a number of investment in Africa, for instance, not in critical minerals, but in other area. We had our food productions in Nigeria. We have our pharma productions in Ghana, for instance, in South Africa. We are planning to establish a vaccine manufacturing in West Africa, where we would create the raw materials in Indonesia and then send to them and they do all the packaging. So this type of cooperations simply did not exist in the past, right? It's always from the West to invest in developing countries. But now, if we can bring these strategic issues, come forward, having the spirit of the non-aligned movement, then we can leverage ourselves among the members to work together much more with trust, I would say, because I think that is a key issue. That foreign investors come to your country, then the issue is about trust. So, yes, Ibu, it's not just being nice, but I think it's also has a strategic value for the host country, for the investor as well, and how we can pool our knowledge to to be able to stand even taller if there are other countries coming to any member of the land movement. Thank you.